All right. Hi, everyone. Good evening again. I am Marian Dixis. I am the Director of Student Affairs and an Associate Professor of Teaching here at the School of Social Work. I'd like to welcome you all. I know that we have new and continuing students on this Zoom call, and we're really excited that you're joining us this evening for our alumni panel. And I would also like to welcome my colleague who's facilitating this event with me this evening, Christine Morales. Do you want to just say hello, Christine? Yeah, there you go.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're excited to share all the great work that our alumni are doing, so stay tuned.
Okay, so we do have with us three panelists. And the plan for this evening is that I'm going to introduce them very, very briefly because they all have very impressive career paths already in the few years that they've been out. And so I'm going to really briefly introduce them. We do have a number of questions that we'll be asking, Christine and I will be asking the panelists to respond to. And I'm going to ask them to keep their responses as brief as possible because ultimately I would like the opportunity to allow anyone on the call, any student on the call, to ask a question, to chime in, whether it's by raising your hand and we'll call and you can unmute yourself and ask the question live, or you can feel free to put your question in the chat and Christine and I will be monitoring that chat. However, sometimes if it gets really busy in the chat, it's hard to kind of see what's coming in. So you might need to keep nudging us if we miss your post for whatever reason, okay? Hope that sounds okay. Feel free to put your video on so we can kind of see each other, connect with each other, but you're not required to do so. So without further ado, let's get started. I just want to make sure that Kenneth is not here. I haven't seen Kenneth on, so Kenneth, if you're here, if you can just unmute yourself quickly, let me know you are here. Okay. All right, so thank you all again for being here. And one of our panelists that is with us this evening is Gino Gatpandan. Gino is a graduate of the MSW program. He graduated in 2019. He was in the clinical specialization and also completed the Aging and Health Certificate program. He's currently a licensed social worker. And as you'll hear from Gino, he'll tell you about where he's currently working in his responses and more about his career path since graduating just a year ago. So thank you for being with us tonight, Gino. We also have with us Lizette Godino. Lizette completed her MSW in 2018. She was in the MAP specialization, and also she declared an area of emphasis in global social work and completed the LISTA certificate, sorry, it wasn't a certificate program at that point, an area of emphasis in LISTA as well, which stands for Latino Initiative for Social Training and Assessment. And she is also a licensed social worker. So Lizette, thank you for being with us today. And finally, we have with us Christina Inyang. Christina completed the MSW program in 2016. She was in the clinical specialization, and she is both a licensed clinical social worker as well as a licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor. And Christina, that's quite impressive in just a few years of graduating. So thank you for being with us today. We're excited to hear about your background and career path as well. So without further ado, I'd like to start with our first question is, can you share with us why you chose the Rutgers School of Social Work to pursue your MSW degree? And just for the sake of, let's start with Christina and then go backwards to Lizette and Gino. So Christina, can you respond to that question for us? Just unmute yourself.
There it is. Can everyone hear me? Okay, perfect. So the year was 2012. At the time, I was experiencing a lot of transition. I just got fired from a case management position, and my husband was moving me to New Jersey at the time. And this was also during a time during Trayvon Martin's death. So a lot was happening in terms of me revamping and resetting. And so we were geographically located near the Rutgers Newark campus, and so it was ideal to apply to the Rutgers Newark campus. And upon researching the different MSW programs, I fell in love with the coursework at Rutgers, specifically the diversion and inclusion syllabus. And so that's why I applied at Rutgers, New York.
Thank you, Christina. Lizette?
Hi, everyone. So for me, I graduated in 2014 with a bachelor's in psychology. So I was also transitioning between what exactly I wanted to do career-wise, law school being one of them. And looking at Rutgers School of Social Work, I saw that they had a dual degree program. I started taking their professional credit courses as an unmatriculated student, and I really fell in love with the way that the courses were designed, and I liked the fact that they also would be incorporated to the work that you would do as a master's student. So that is why I decided to go with the Rutgers School of Social Work, and hoping in the future to go to law school, which that would also provide me credits for law school. So that was one of the reasons why I went there.
Thank you, Lizette. Gino?
I'm sorry, I had to figure out this whole Zoom thing. I'm not really used to it. So why did I choose Rutgers School of Social Work? I think the really big standout thing was affordability. I did have big dreams of going into school with like NYU or like Columbia or something like that. But, those are all expensive, and you can get comparable, if not really great education from Rutgers, because I am an alumni, 2016 School of Arts and Sciences. Like Lizette, I have a psychology degree. But I knew that they had just such an array and diverse set of experiences that could be afforded to students that would, of course, enroll. I came in with the, interests in, aging and health and healthcare, social work. So I applied, got in, and then I just was happy through and through.
Thanks, Gino. So that actually transitions to my next question. And Gino, if that's okay, I'll have you answer first, and then we'll have Lisette and then Christina. So how did the school or the MSW program prepare you for your career?
So right now I'm social worker 1 over at the University Hospital in Newark, New Jersey. So if you can all imagine, it's an incredibly interesting time to be in healthcare social work, given the current crisis that we're experiencing. I think the entire program, involved itself with a lot of issues of diversity and oppression. And the classes that I specifically took, the aging and health classes, it really kind of ingrained in me a lot of the resources that are required for people who are sick in the hospital, or, long-term care, or all of these different places that are now impacted by the pandemic. We had to, of course, learn how to work with people one-on-one, work with families, work with groups, and Rutgers provided all of that, all of the different kinds of experiences. But you really got to look for them as well when you're, going through the entire program. So Rutgers, did a phenomenal job with resource linkage, which is something that social workers do every single day. And specifically with my role as a social worker at the hospital, they definitely did teach me a lot about loss. This was a very incredibly emotionally taxing time. That specific class is one of my favorites. And again, with, group counseling and understanding the systems as it works within the individual and the systems among the systems, it's definitely a program that I think you all are going to very much enjoy and be prepared for, no matter where you end up. If it's healthcare, if it's in law, if it's in, general social services, government, whatever have you.
Thanks, Gino. So Lisette, same question. How did the program and the MSW prepare you for your career?
So as previously stated, I went through the MAP concentration, which is the management policy concentration. I knew going into my first year that I would be declaring MAP my second year. And I think that second year, what I learned so much about what social work, the potential what social work can be. It's not just helping on a clinical level, but helping on a macro level as well. And for me, my position now as a program director really came from the idea that was birthed inside a classroom, working with several of my classmates on developing a program and doing strategic planning. So for me, I'd have to say that the program itself created my position. It helped give birth to that idea, and really push me to advocate for myself and, you know, put forth these ideas, show them to people who might be able to help. And fortunately, I was able to pitch my idea to my executive director, and she helped locate and apply for grants that would fund the program. So it definitely, I have a lot to be grateful for in the program.
So I love these various experiences that I'm hearing, Gino. I hear that you were able to develop skill sets that are applied to your current work. And Lisette, you had the space to create and innovate solutions that you're now applying as a practitioner. So I'm excited to hear, Christina, how did the program prepare you for your career?
I would point out two major experiences. So I would say that the field placements that I was given were invaluable. I was fortunate to have interned at Main Street Counseling Center in West Orange and Mount Carmel Guild Behavioral Healthcare in Jersey City, where I was able to grow as a clinician. I was given my own caseload, of course, under the supervision of a licensed clinician. And pretty much I was given autonomy to mature and find my voice as a clinician and discover what worked and did not work for me. And as Gino mentioned, given the experience to work with a diverse population. The second thing I would say is working as a research assistant to a professor who was conducting research in the field of substance use and focused on oppression and critical consciousness. So I would say both of those experiences really helped in terms of my career choices and networking and taking risks.
Thank you all. I really do appreciate that. I think that Christina and Gino, in your responses, you really talk about you're looking for opportunities, that during your time in the program, you were sought after these opportunities that wouldn't necessarily, they're not necessarily in front of your face. They're not saying, here I am. They're just out there, and you kind of took the risk, the initiative to seek them out and stay connected and network in a number of ways. And so I do want to highlight that as something that we do speak with students a lot about. And so I'm glad to hear you echoing those same statements. And so going to our next question, as you reflect on your time in the program, please share with us some advice you have for both new incoming students and continuing students. And for this question, we'll let Lizette get started, then we'll go to Christina and then to Gino.
So, you know, kind of going off your last comment, like for me, I do think that some, probably like the advice that I would definitely have is the importance of networking and building relationships with your classmates. That is really important. I built relationships with many of my classmates, and it helped in developing my program. I was able to reach out to some of them who I knew where they had now taken places of employment that actually helped out. For example, Hannah, she works for the Advocates for Children of New Jersey, and that has been a great and valuable resource to my program. So I would definitely say networking. You never know who's gonna end where or who's gonna be working where. That's always important, I think.
Thank you, Lizette. I think that we underestimate the value of networking with classmates. Sometimes you hear about, you know, professors, your adjuncts, anyone, you know, your field instructors and people at the agency that you're with, but we really don't talk about classmates enough. So I really do appreciate you highlighting that. Christina?
So I wrote down three things. I would say to not be afraid to bring what is happening in the world into the classroom. I remember being told when I was preparing for my LSW exam that the test specifically examined book or scientific knowledge. However, we're living in a time where what is happening in society or your experiential knowledge can be used and processed in the classroom. So using your classrooms to have those important conversations. Just like Lizette was saying, connecting and networking with your peers and professors because they will become your colleague in the field and can be used as a resource. And then lastly, I would just say that this is not a bachelor level degree. And so truly taking the time to choose the electives and certification courses that really interest you and you want to learn more about and absorb as much information as possible during this time.
Thank you. Gino?
So, like, I want to echo what my colleagues, my esteemed colleagues, are saying. It's really about just sort of immersing yourself in the program in and of itself, right? So the program has many different facets. It's the interactions you have with your classmates, with your professors. You all are assigned advisors. They are a resource for you. That's really important. Take away any and all experiences that are out there, really, that the school offers. All right, you are, and I hate saying that, you know, money is a part of this, but it is. You are all paying for this degree, so stretch it out. You know, I was actually and Marion will nod to this, I was the first year rep for the GSA the first year I was there, and I was the co-chair of the GSA, the Graduate Student Association, the second year. And that was an experience that I wanted to be able to take, to be able to kind of garner some leadership qualities, you know, something that social workers do every day. They lead, you know, they lead their clients into trying to identify whatever it is that they need to be able to sort of thrive. And they try to offer whatever resources, again, are available to them. And that's something that I personally wanted to be able to do. Not something I was able to do in high school. I wasn't really popular enough or whatever, but like, I wasn't able to do that in undergrad. But if there are certain opportunities that are available, you got to seek them out. You really have to seek them out, because like what Christine said, I'm sorry, let me just get this phone set up. It's just, my phone's kind of acting up. Like what Christina said basically is that, you know, this is a master's level degree. You know, this is the big time. You know, this is not just something you want to just show up to class and do papers. We're talking about your professional lives here, and it starts here. It really does start here, and you all want to make sure that you are all just seeking what it is that you need, because this is the building block and the foundations that you're going to be building for what it is to come wherever your careers take you.
Thanks, Gino. So I'm gonna move on to the next question. And I think the order would be Christina, Gino, and then Lisette. I think that's right. So the question I have is, what was a salient or aha moment or lesson that you had or that you learned as an MSW student? How has it shaped you as a practitioner?
So when I was thinking about this question, the aha moment or the salient moment that stood out for me, and I don't think it's a negative aha moment, but it was just it was something that it was an aha moment for me. So I was in diversity inclusion, my diversity inclusion course, and a student made a comment, and so I realized during class that day, it was my first semester, that that not all social work students and professionals are created equal. And I mean that to say that we all bring our own individual framework or schemas to the program and the learning environment. And the comment that a classmate made, it made me think about that for a moment, because it could essentially be seen as a microaggression, and I don't remember the comment, but it just reminded me that we come to the table, whether with our work with clients or at our jobs or with each other, with our own frame of reference, and that's important to remember. It was a reminder that we all haven't yet arrived, and our learning is a lifelong process, and if we truly decide to become change agents, that we need to remember that. When I entered the field, I made the decision to be a change agent, and I have this relentless desire to evolve and continue to be a life learner. So that's how it shaped my trajectory as a practitioner.
Thanks, Christina. I love that comment. It's so true, not created equally. And one of the things I always caution people is that when we say we as social workers, and I'm like, I don't think that we as social workers all have the same opinion, but we are very much binded by our code of ethics. So I always remind people and myself whenever I'm like, oh, what should I do? There's some guidelines in the code of ethics, but yes, thank you. And then I think I said Lisette. Is that correct? Sorry, I don't remember the order.
So for me, a lesson I learned really was to advocate for myself. Part of the program, sometimes in the program, they tell you that, for example, for your field internship, that they will walk you through and help you, but there isn't nothing wrong also with you looking yourself. My second year, the field office wanted to place me in a hospital, not necessarily in a management concentration. So I had to really advocate for myself to find something that would be the right fit for me. So I was able to find an organization that their mission stood out to me. And I was also able to set up a contract with that organization with Rutgers. So they became a new field placement for Rutgers. And I had a great experience there. So I would say never feel like you have to settle for something. At the end of the day, like Gina said, you are paying for it. So it's definitely worth it for you to advocate for what you want to learn and what type of experience you want to have.
Thanks, Lisette. Gino?
All right, so I want to echo what Christina was saying earlier. I too have had experiences, especially in diversity and oppression. I think continuing students on this on the Zoom meeting would know what diversity and oppression is all about. And to the new students, I would look very much forward to that particular course. But there have been, comments that have been said specifically in the areas of race that I was just so taken aback by, because again, like what Christina said, not all social workers are created equal. And I'm even finding that to be the case very much so now in my professional life. Basically, I came into this program a little bit naive and thinking that everyone was going to show up a little bug-eyed and wanted to save the world, and that's all well and good, and I still have that deep in my heart that I'm hoping that I'm changing the world or changing someone's world as I work. But there are different people who have different goals, different mindsets, and I'm not saying that these courses are meant for exposure to weed anyone out, but it's to sort of bring light to the very different perspectives that many people have that I may not have myself. So I would really just brace yourselves for that, because it's while we think of social work and change agents and code of ethics and all of that, we're bringing our own personal experiences to the program, right? And we're bringing them to one another, because we're going to be sharing spaces, learning about the systems, learning about people and the vulnerable and the issues that people face and how we can address them. We're all going to have different ideas of how to address them. We're all going to have different, and the ideology of how we would feel we would address these things are all going to be very different. We might be basing them off of personal experience. So my biggest aha moment was essentially was the fact that, I may just be, and I don't mean to make something political. I did meet a very staunch Republican social work student, and we would think social work is more often not perceptually liberal. And it was interesting to kind of see what her take was. I'm not going to agree, but in class, I heard just the differences, how she would approach things. And that to me was the biggest sort of thing that I learned while I was in the program. How has it shaped me as a practitioner? I work in one of the most diverse, if not the most diverse city in New Jersey, Newark. There are a lot of diverse people that I'm meeting, all of these different experiences. I work in the trauma unit, so it's a lot of just understanding, why things are happening, what, different resources could possibly help these people, and guiding people in the way that they, where they're at, basically. So, it's always just imagining people, whether social worker or person, they're all different, and you're all going to see that as you move along.
Thank you, Gino. And just to comment on Lizette's points about advocacy, we definitely want students to express, what they are looking for. We definitely want them to be active participants in their educational process and journey. But we just do ask that you work with the field office. So yes, the field office does develop new relationships all the time that students bring to us. And so it does have to be in line and work with the field office to make sure that we are meeting the requirements according to our accreditation body, and then according to our curriculum as well. So that's definitely an option. So thank you for pointing that out, Lizette. So to move on to our next question, there are a couple of questions coming in, and we do have just, one or two more that we'll ask, and then we'll get to the questions in the chat. But what do you know now that you wish you knew when you were a student? And Lizette, let's have you get started with this one, and then we'll go to Gino and Christina.
Okay, for me, I think it was the importance of taking the LSW. I, for the most part, knew I would not be going clinical right after graduation, but I feel like at least in my program, I wasn't too stressed to obtain an LSW, and it really does make a lot of sense to try to go for that as soon as you can while still in the program. The information is still fresh in your mind, and I feel like it does provide for a smoother transition after graduation. I unfortunately had to wait a couple months to starting my place of employment because they were looking for an LSW. So, I did get on that as soon as I could, but I wish I would have done it a little sooner.
Thank you, Lizette. Christina? Or Gino, I can't remember. I don't know what I said. Someone go.
I can go.
Sorry, I can't keep track. Just trying to be fair.
So I would say, so the first one I would say is more future oriented. I would say your first job out of grad school will most likely not be your dream job or your forever job. It may take a couple of positions to understand what's a good fit for you. Since grad school, I think I've gone to 3 different jobs. Right now I'm in my third position, just trying to find the right fit. Just trying to find the right fit. The second part I would say is if you do go the clinical route, it is a journey, and the courses that you're taking or you're going to take, you're learning about human behavior in the social environment, human sexuality, violence, and trauma. And it can either act as an inspiration to engage in self-reflection, or it can be extremely triggering depending on unresolved issues that you may have experienced in your past. So I would say, or I would recommend perhaps having or investing in your own therapist to explore any unresolved issues that could potentially act as a barrier to truly helping others. This wasn't really talked about a lot when I was a grad student. I did have my own therapist then, but I think that would be helpful to know as an incoming or existing MSW student.
Thank you, Christina. Gino?
Right. So my colleagues are giving incredible answers, and I share them. I share those sentiments. What I wish I knew when I was a student was how important confidence is in yourself. You do have your supervisors, your field supervisors, your advisors within the school, your classmates to kind of lean on when, at a hard day at field, you just didn't know what to do. I'm going to be honest, when I started my job, I was expected to be autonomous to about 99 to 100%, right? With backup from my supervisor if need be. So building that confidence is something I wish I had started back in graduate school, whether it be with my field placements or in classes, just opening up more, because when you're out there in the real world, and it doesn't really have to be social work, it could be like whatever profession you choose to get into. For the most part, you're going to be expected to operate with some form of autonomy, to be able to make your own choices and stick with them. There's something to be said about, just like being like narcissistic and being like, oh, I know everything. And there's also something that, what's really should be said is just, just understanding concepts, learning all of them, and just, keeping them, in here, and of course, writing them down and bringing them with you wherever you go, and just being able to back yourself up confidently. and saying that, I've had these experiences before. I think this could work for my client here. And another thing that I wish I knew, as a student was there's a lot of responsibility specifically with being licensed. There's a lot of work with being licensed, and it's something you want to protect. So make sure that when you're going for it, it's all great, it's all exciting, but it's also something that you want to make sure you understand the regs, you understand what's important. For my colleagues here, I'm going to remind everybody that we are due for our re-up of our licenses in the end of August. So that's something that you all have to just make sure that you remind yourselves of. All the bureaucratic stuff is all important too, in addition to all the real nitty-gritty social work stuff.
So thanks, Gino, for your response. I'm gonna go to the chat box. There are a few questions. The first question that I see, and I'm going to do something a little spicy. I'm gonna leave it to you three to decide who wants to answer first, and then second, and then third. I'm gonna leave it to you, but the question is, how difficult is it to find a job after you graduate? And I think that you all can define how you feel it was difficult or easy. And then how long does it take to find a clinical LSW job in general for you in your experience?
And with that, if you can also share what your first job was, because I think Christina mentioned it might not be your dream job. So mention what your first, mention that process, that journey, and then what that actual first job was.
I'll go first. So I guess I'll go first because I'll probably have less to say because I just graduated in 2019. I had to operate in a way that would secure my future much faster than your average person, because I was living at home with my parents at the time that graduation was coming. They're moving to Florida. My career aspirations were up here in New Jersey, New York, to be able to work with all of these different populations. And personally, I wanted to kind of live independently in the same area I grew up in. So I had to figure out how I was going to get my LSW, find out where I was going to get a job, find an apartment, all at the same time. So it was a lot of life moves all at once. Basically, with me wanting to be in the healthcare system, I kind of advocated during graduate school to get a placement in a hospital, just so then it looked nice on a resume, right? And that was my tactic, and I got that at Kindred Hospital in Rahway. And then while I was finishing up my master's, I was actually sending my resumes out as license pending, because I had taken the exam, Lizette had said this is, as a very important, crucial part of your program, take the LSW early. I did that, passed it in February of 2019, and then got my license June. And then, with that verbiage of license pending, I was actually afforded some interviews. With the expectation that I was going to graduate, unless my professors had it out for me. We knew that was going to come. We just had to negotiate all of the details. I landed the job at University Hospital in Newark essentially first. I did get other offers as well within hospitals. I don't believe hospital work to be before COVID, I don't believe hospital work to be the toughest way to go if you wanted to apply. I knew I wanted to do it, but again, it's also about who you know and what it is you do, how you formulate your game plan in terms of putting your resume out there.
Thanks, Gino. That is strategic. If you had a field placement that was related to your future work that you wanted to do, so thank you. I'm sorry. I think Christina, you were saying something.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So I believe it took about 6 months to find a position outside of grad school. So first I contacted my network of peers. I think I even reached out to a few professors. I reached out to Charles, who worked in the MSW program. And then I finally heard back from the professor that I did the research assistantship for. She needed a project coordinator to run the day-to-day operations for the research study. And she reached out to me, which was great because I love research. And at the time, I really, really loved research. And so I did that work part-time. Then I also got hired by a group practice where there were just tons of LSWs working towards their clinical hours, and we were given supervision by one of the staff members there. We had our own caseload, and it was just providing psychotherapy to private clients.
Yeah, so for me, so after graduating, I was working part-time while I was in the program. So I was working part-time as a paralegal in an immigration center. And the executive director of the nonprofit is who I was communicating this idea that of the new program that we would be starting and what it could look like. And she took a leap of faith in me. And, you know, after graduation, me and her were looking for, mostly her, she definitely had more connections and looking for someone who would fund the program. And luckily, there was a huge grant that did come in to fund the program. So again, my hiring was contingent on me also getting the license, which I had not proactively done. I hadn't taken my test till October. And then after I was awarded the license in January, I had started the position. So for me, it really was more just of a transition in the organization and positions, not so much having like in between jobs.
Thank you all. Linda's asking a really good question that is needs us to think outside the box a little bit. And you all don't have to feel compelled to respond. So if one person can comment, if there's other people, if you have other points to bring up, that'd be great too. But Linda's wondering, for incoming MSW students, so we're going to be remote in the fall, as you all probably have heard. So the upcoming semester, how would you advise that they network? So any tips you have about networking in this remote environment? And thank you, Linda, for that really good question.
So I can share some experience part of within the MSW program, there was some hybrid courses I took. So that would mean we did some online work. There was our research class was strictly online, but I did do a long social work course that was a hybrid. So we would meet about 2 or 3 times in the semester on a weekend. So I think definitely in the research class in the online format, I learned a lot about my fellow classmates. I feel more than sometimes you learn in the actual classroom, just because the way sometimes that the assignments are formatted, you share a lot about yourself and about your ideals. And so I feel like you do get to learn more about what people are doing. And I believe on those online formats also they have like an active chat room, correct? Yeah, yes. So you can still open up that line for networking and learning more about your classmates.
I also wanted to kind of make a point. I think I alluded to it or mentioned it earlier, the Graduate Student Association. They're meant to do programming for the student body to try to do outreach and try to see what kinds of like events and whatever have you, whatever. They're kind of like the connection between the administration of the School of Social Work and the students, and to try to bring about all of these different programs that might be beneficial. It could be programs on race topics. It could be programs on self-care. It could be different programs on, just like your clinical, your LSW, like any kinds of, different programs that people could come together. I know under these circumstances, we're all saying that the semester is going to be likely virtual. I would still try to reach out to them if they've been elected. I presume they have been. And see what you can make your recommendations if you do have these ideas of trying to network, because they would be the ones to try to see what kind of resources they can have to pull all of that together. Also, I think Facebook, if you all have it, like Instagram, if you all have you guys want to create, like guys and girls want to create like a little group of whatever in whichever social media platform exists, that would be also an idea as well as you move into the fall semester.
I just like to comment. So Gino, thank you for that. And I have to say, we did go into a remote setting in March as like an emergency, right, to the pandemic. But the silver lining, in my opinion, to this is that when we've had programming using Zoom or any other platform, we've actually seen an increased number of attendance at these events, which is kind of awesome. And related to that, we've been able to bring students together in a way we haven't in the past. So before, it felt a little bit more siloed in the sense that New Brunswick students knew each other, Camden students knew each other, Newark students knew each other. But now on Zoom, doesn't matter where you are, doesn't matter if you're on the online program in California, doesn't matter if you're in the intensive weekend program. We've had all sorts of students on these calls, which has been a really nice way to be connected with people that you wouldn't have normally had the opportunity to connect with. So I think that has been a silver lining.
And that's awesome. I think, when I, during my time, it was what you were saying, siloed, and with this whole virtual experience, I can only imagine just the different kinds of people you're meeting from wherever in the US. So that's incredible to me, really.
Yeah, and the other thing is I'm the faculty advisor for the Graduate Student Association. So if you need a link to them, I'm happy to connect you with the leaders there. So feel free to reach out to me at any point. But I'll pass it off to Christine for the next question.
Thanks. So I'm scrolling through the chat box, and I think the next question is, how early should we attempt to take the LSW exam? So it's more questions about licensing and what your suggestions are. Anyone?
I'll go first. So I took mine, if I remember, either in March or April, and that's just because of my personality and wanting to do things at a certain time in a certain time frame. But then also I just wanted the information to be fresh on my brain. There was a lot going on in my last semester. And so I wanted to make sure that I had the textbook knowledge at the forefront of my brain. So I decided to take it as soon as I was able to take it. So I would say it's based on your comfort level.
So Christina, just to clarify, March or April of the year before you graduated, correct? So if you were to graduate May, what year did you graduate? I apologize.
2016. So prior to graduating, I took it while I was still a student. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So just so everyone's aware, Marian, you can tell me if I'm misspeaking, the soonest that a student can take it is in their last semester of their MSW program. So
I was going to say that, and I was going to unmute myself, so I'll mute it again.
That's fine. So that is the absolute soonest is that last semester. But as Lisette has demonstrated, you can take it thereafter. And Lisette, how many months was it from graduation till when you took it?
So I presented it at the end of October of 2018. I remember because it was going to be Halloween soon. And I graduated in May. So yeah, I took it with a couple months after, and it does, keep in mind, it does take time to get the application ready, and you have to get it notarized and get your things ready. So do give yourself time for that, because although I believe, I don't know if you might be able to correct this, that they were trying to see if people could sit for the exam proctored, right? Is that something that they're trying to push through so you don't have to go to a testing center?
That's something that's currently underway, that's right. But it does still take a little bit of time, as you're pointing out, Lizette, to get approved to even sit for the license. I saw Gino eagerly shaking his head. We had lots of conversations about the frustrations of getting through that process. So I'm glad that you're pointing that out, Lizette, as well.
Yeah, Marian knew me through and through the entire process. I think it was one of the most anxiety-inducing situations of my lifetime, but that's just me by nature. I wouldn't be too scared about the whole process in general. I took a bit of a more pragmatic approach because I knew where my life was headed in terms of my personal situation. So I kind of wanted to be licensed right after graduate school because I was going to be out of a place to live. So I needed to secure a job and everything. And with my line of work, an LSW is essential. It's actually mandatory. And I know that if I'm not a really good test taker, really. I took my exam the February of the year that I graduated, and I passed it that same time. Had I failed, I know that you have to wait about 90 days after you actually you've unfortunately failed to take it again, and then you're going to have to wait that time for all the bureaucratic stuff wherein the payment gets made to the licensing board and they issue a license. So I was pretty aggressive with this because I wasn't willing to have it any other way. I was determined to make sure that I was employed at least by the summer with the job that I was going to be able to support myself with, given my personal circumstances. So I did have to look at like that systems perspective, social work 101, the entire system that you're going to be dealing with when you get the LSW. There was a lot that went into it, and you had to understand, and you had to create a backup plan too. And that's why I was aggressive as I was when I was trying to get my LSW.
Thank you. There's some questions about preparing for the LSW exam specifically. So can you share a little bit about what you did to prepare for the for the LSW exam, and then I can share what the school offers for students as well.
Yes, I can definitely talk a little bit about that. I went to one of, there was like a session that the school offered to kind of go overview of the exam, and we actually did practice questions. And actually sitting there and getting walked through question by question and how we're supposed to think and meet where the client is at, that's the one thing that really stuck in my mind. And I feel that even though I did the management track, I still felt prepared for the LSW. I acquired the recommended book and kind of just read through that. And I believe everybody has a different way of studying. But for me, what really helped was reading through the book and kind of really trying to think about the material and think about what the question was asking and where we could meet the client at, especially with those questions. I fortunately did pass my first time, but during the study time, I did find myself getting frustrated with the sample questions. I was not doing as well on the sample questions and the sample test. So I did have to step back from that and just refocus on the material itself, and that really helped in passing the exam. And I have not taken the LCSW yet. I'm only an LSW.
I'll share just something that I was doing. So throughout my, I guess, last year, I was either at my actual job, field placement, school, or anywhere in between. I would actually put YouTube videos on my Bluetooth in my car for the things that I kind of needed help with. So if there's questions on like medications, obviously you're not going to need to know like the chemical composition of all of that, but just like what it does for certain people with schizophrenia, all of these other clinical stuff, and other questions regarding defense mechanisms and stuff like that. YouTube has a lot of videos that like actually explain a lot of these things in ways that I can actually remember. So I'd be driving down the parkway and I'd be listening about like, Haldol or like projection and how it works as a defense mechanism and stuff. And I would actually hear like the person, they might have had like an accent or something, like, and it would go into my head, and then I'd kind of ingrain it because I was remembering how they were telling me all of this information through the YouTube video on Bluetooth in my car. It's also about getting creative. Like everyone studies differently. Lizette said that very clearly. It's just finding your thing. Study things broadly. Don't expect to get every single question under the sun, but of course, just figure out what works for you and just run with that.
Just to quickly piggyback what my colleagues were saying, I think, so I took the course that I think, Lisette, you were talking about, the Dawn Afkar course that reviewed all of what would be on the test and how to strategize. Gino, definitely with the YouTube videos, I'm great at learning through audible means, so that was very helpful. I also had a study buddy, and I know during these times you're not able to do that, but I had someone to like bounce off questions and walk through the sample questions to fully understand why the book said this was the right answer versus what I initially thought the answer was. And then I think that was it. Yep.
Thank you. So just really quickly, the school has been able to secure an electronic copy of the exam prep So I know that some students really like to have it in hand and purchase it. And so it's really up to however you learn best. But you don't have to feel obligated to buy it. It's available through the Rutgers Library. Some of the panelists mentioned, we do have some mini workshops to just prepare you in terms of what the exam process is like, how to apply to take the exam, and to go through some sample questions. We also have full day workshops through our continuing education department to prepare you for the exam. And they're highly discounted. The dean has allowed them to be at a very reduced cost for our current students. And I believe Christina was referencing NASW of New Jersey that offers also full day classes that you can take. So there are lots of resources out there, and we share all this information with students as you're preparing to take that exam in your final year of the program. So well before your final semester, you'll start getting information about the exam process. And we've also infused some of the content in your advanced year clinical course, not advanced year practice courses that involves both the MAP specialization and the clinical. It's new, so I think Gino's class is probably the first where we had them start taking that test prep as part of the requirements for their practice classes. So we are trying to really push and encourage and support students in the process to get and pass and take their LSW exam. Obviously not in that order, but you all know what I mean. So thank you all. I just want to pause for a second. I think we got through all the questions in the chat. I want to see if anyone wants to have the opportunity to ask a question live by unmuting themselves. You can feel free to go ahead and raise your hand. If you go to the participants tab, you can raise your hand and join us that way. You can also include a question in the chat if you want. And as we're waiting for people to do that, if Gino, Lizette, or Christina, if there's anything that's really burning that you want to make sure that you say before we wrap up, now is your chance to do that while we see what other questions come in. So I'm putting you all on the spot.
I think I would just say one thing, and I think I mentioned it in the beginning, just not being afraid to take a risk in leaving a position because it's not the best fit or it's a toxic environment, or you feel that you've given all that you could give in that position and the growth potential is no longer happening. So I think if it's one thing I would leave is just not being afraid to take a risk to leave a position because it's just not a good fit for you.
Thank you, Christina. So Carly has her hand up. So Carly, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, I just had a question. With classes being remote now, how is like field placement going to be changing?
So I'm assuming that's for me and not the panelists. So I'll go ahead and respond to that if that's okay with it. I don't want to take time away from the panelists, but Field is moving forward. Field is working on placing students in agencies. There's lots of agencies that are working, taking interns, working as planned. And so that's definitely a conversation to have with the Field office. But they are actively placing students that are on track to be in Field this upcoming year.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So Gino, Lizette, and Christina, there's someone, Teresa's asking about contact information. So I don't know if you feel comfortable including it in the chat, your email address, if there's a preferred email address, or I can include mine and then connect them with you that way. So let me know what you each prefer. I don't want it to be a burden on you, but I want students to be able to reach out to someone if they have further questions. I think everyone's in the process of typing their email address, and I'll include mine as well. And mine is easy to find if you just search my name as well online. So Lizette, thank you for including yours. And Christina, thank you for including yours. So I think we did really great timing. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Gina, for including your email as well. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Thank you to the panelists for sharing all of their wealth of knowledge and all the tips and supports to students that they have while they're in the program. I think it's really exciting to actually connect with graduates to see about their career path, to see about all the wonderful, great things that they're doing. And thank you to all the students that are here. I know that we're in the middle of like dinner time, so those of you that have other responsibilities, thank you for taking the time to be with us. And don't hesitate to reach out if there's any questions that you have. Christine Morales is in admissions and I'm in student affairs. So for new or incoming students, there's someone you can connect with to ask whatever questions are on your minds. And that's all. Christine, is there anything you want to say, or any of the panelists, as we wrap up and end this Zoom meeting?
I'm including my email also.
Okay, awesome. And I'm going to stop recording at this point.